Hey everybody, welcome to the Dad Challenge podcast. My name is Josh. Thanks for joining me today. Well, we're going down the 8 passengers thing again. The niece of Jody, Hildebrandt, has come out on a podcast. It was a little while ago, actually. It was a couple weeks ago, and I haven't had a chance to look at it. I had some researchers helping me, dig in, because it's a really, really, really long podcast, and I really want to just touch on the main things. But it actually is very, very, very telling, and it exposes a lot about who Jody was, and these are the types of things that are coming out now. It is actually crazy. From the moment that we saw Ruby's arrested to where we are right now, this thing has just exploded. And it's to note that Kevin still doesn't have his kids. So it's getting quite interesting, quite crazy, and we were right all along. So let's talk about it. So this is a person called Jessie Hildebrandt, and they are Jody's niece, and grew up with her and everything else and knows so much about her. Now look, I'm trying to respect their pronouns, just because this is really, really not about that, but this is what they want to go by. And so if I do mess that up, I apologize ahead of time. I will try my best to keep their pronouns in mind while I'm talking with them. So John Dellin is from Mormon Stories podcast. He interviewed Jessie, and it's quite interesting. I got some timestamps. I can't do the whole podcast because, again, obviously it's 3 hours long. So I've had my researcher kind of dig in through and find out like the best parts and most interesting things that we can dive into, because it's really quite interesting. So with that being said, it's going to be a long podcast. We'll get through as much as we possibly can, but I think it's going to be very, very telling about what we discover here together, if you haven't seen this already.
It is September 7th, 2023, and today we are knee-deep in coverage of the 8 passengers, Frankie family, Jody Hildebrandt connexions scandal. To do a 20-second summary, Mormon influencer family, Frankie family, who had a wildly successful YouTube channel called 8 Passengers without risking, defamation or whatever. So now that Jody Hildebrandt is in jail, a few courageous people have reached out and said that they feel safe enough now to tell their story.
So this is the stronghold that someone like Jody has on people. It's so cult-like and so incredible. This is the stronghold that the Mormon church has on people. Don't forget, everybody, the Mormon church and these bishops all colluded to send these people to Jody, right? She lost her license for a long time or whatever, something happened, but they were still sending clients. And if you look at all the past clients that have spoken out, it's always my ex-wife and I. It's nobody ever stayed together. You know what I mean? She was very unsuccessful at her job, right? And I think she did that on purpose. But it's very telling that these people were scared to speak out because she had the full backing of the Mormon church. Now, that's a whole video in itself. The fact that this monolith religion that's worth hundreds of billions and billions of dollars, that hides hundreds of billions of dollars, has a lot of power, specifically here in Utah as well. Okay? And she was backed by this church. Not a lot of people are talking about that. But she was backed, and she has the best lawyer in the state, by the way. It is in the LDS's interest for Jody and Ruby to get off without anything here, right? To get off with a slap on the wrist or whatever. It's in their best interest to make this go away, however they can do it. Whether that's through corruption or paying off people or whatever. I don't know how this all works. This is like way deeper than anybody can ever think. But this church has a lot to lose in this case. Okay, these people watch these people because it's safe for them to watch it. But when the truth comes out about how they actually parent and raise their children, that reflects badly on the Mormon church. They think it's safe, and that's why they gathered millions and millions of subscribers. Most of them are Mormon. It's safe for them to watch it. They're not getting any outside influence. But when this stuff really hits the fan, and it really, really did, it does reflect on the Mormon church. And they don't like that.
And one of those very courageous people is Jody Hildebrandt's niece, Jessie Hildebrandt. And, if I could just read to you what Jessie sent me, a summary of what Jessie sent me, this will give you an indication of what we're going to be talking about today. Jessie wrote to me, "It's hard to quantify the emotional and spiritual abuse and torture Jody Hildebrandt caused, and I think I'll probably have to do so anyways for the police. But physically, just to name a few off the top of my head, I experienced being tied up, blindfolded, punched in the back, my knees kicked out, and dragged by my hair upstairs. I was blindfolded and tied and thrown into a car and forced to lay down on the ground, so I can't, quote, manipulate people into thinking anything is wrong, close quote. Then drove into the mountains and forced to run up and down the mountain in the snow to, quote, force the sin out, close quote. I was...
Guys, this just so you're aware, this is Jesse saying what Jody did to her. And this is... I know that not all Mormons are going to do this, okay? But I want you to know this. I want you to know that if you are a fundamental Mormon, like, not even fundamental, like if you are just a mainline Mormon, if you have a pass, or whatever you call those things, to get into the church, and you have that ability, you've done the secret handshakes, you've gone through all that stuff, you can get married at church, you can go, you can get behind the scenes of the stuff. If you are that type of person that is that invested into the Mormon church, you're like this, okay? Because you are bought and sold. Now, a lot of Mormons will come at me and say, I'm not like this, and okay, but here's what I'm going to say, and I'm going to make it really, really, it's not a secret that I don't like the Mormons, okay? If you have a temple recommend, okay, if you've gone through all that process to get the recommend, which means that you're safe to go into all the things, okay, weddings and all that kind of stuff, and baptize and help baptize other people for the dead, all that kind of stuff. I've done lots of podcasts with some other Mormons about this whole thing, okay? If you've got the temple recommend, if you wear the magical underwear, okay, if you've gone through and wore all the crazy, Chef Boyardee outfits and everything else, and you've done that, and you've gone so far as to be sucked into that level, you believe in the same thing that they do. This Jody Hildebrandt isn't new to this. Isn't new to like raising your kid this way, okay? They honestly believe that you can do things, and people are possessed, and that sin is this, and it can be physically. But it's crazy what the Mormons believe, and it can get so deep. But I'm telling you this: of the people that you watch that are Mormons, it's safe, and the Mormons have a lot to lose because of that. But if you have a temple recommend, if these people that you watch wear their garments and everything else, they're like this. Okay? There's just no other way to put it. I hope that helps. It probably didn't.
What is terrifying for you about this interview? What has kept you from speaking out until now? What, family concerns you might have? Because we talked about this before we started the episode. And then finally, what made you decide to override your fears or risks or concerns to speak out today?
Yeah, definitely. So... one, I've just been afraid of Jody. Jody is a terrifying, powerful, convincing person that has a lot of influence, and a lot of people believe anything and everything that she says.
Mormons. Don't forget, when I always want to parse it back to these, temple recommend card-carrying Mormons who wear the underwear, okay? They will go to their bishop. And Jody has such a platform inside this church, even though she's a woman, which is crazy because the Mormons don't believe in women as leaders, right? They will send her to this. So there's something weird that was going on, or she knows something or something, whatever. Or she was the person that was willing to snitch back to the bishops about what was going on, because the Mormon religion is all about snitching. Just if you guys didn't know that, they snitch on each other to bishops and things like that. And in the Bible college that they all go to, they snitch on each other. It's a whole religion of snitching. It's quite crazy, actually. That that someone has a sin that you are like, it should be none of your damn business anyway, but you will snitch to the bishop. And so apparently she lost her license for a little while because she was snitching, breaking client privilege to go back to these bishops. And so that's just, I need to tell you that.
She systematically destroyed my reputation and my credibility, and kind of used previous problems that I was facing as a teenager, being angry and sad and angsty, and capitalized on that as a reason that anything that I say is not true. And so, and because everything that happened was so, to a lot of people, so fantastical and so surreal, that I think it's easier for a lot of people to just be like, this is too complex, this is too complicated, I have my life to live, I can't really, I don't know what is true, so it's easier to just not. My family has been very unsupportive and invalidating in what happened.
I'll touch on that. So most families in the Mormon church, again, if you are a card-carrying, temple recommend, underwear-wearing Mormon, okay, this is the reality for those families because of what they believe. They're so, and this isn't the fundamental Mormons. These aren't the people with multiple wives. Like, that's why fundamentalists are crazy. There's fundies in every religion, right? But even like the mainline LDS, the ones that follow the rules, I mean, that to me, I have no other way of saying this, but they are fundamentalists. Okay, because they believe this stuff. And your family won't even believe you. And because you live a normal teenage life and you maybe break the rules of Mormonism, like the things like they wrote in the letter, like the torture and the tying up and the punching and everything else, that stuff is just par for the course. But imagine this happening to your child and your aunt is doing it to you. And the family just goes along with it. Now, again, I'm bringing this back to the Mormon Church because this is a really, really big deal. They believe this stuff will help this person. And they think it, and for whatever reason, it might not have, and then will excommunicate Jesse and be like, well, they're so sad about it, but you're not welcome into a family if you aren't Mormon like people who are card-carrying Mormons who believe the same thing. You are ostracized, excommunicated, everybody's sad about it, but they don't talk about you, you're like unmentionable, you're like Voldemort. It's so sad that this religion gets a pass in today's society, and it's not even fundamental. Like, their mainline people are this crazy, okay? I'm going to get a lot of comments from Mormons like, no, we're not like that. You absolutely are like that, okay? You're absolutely like that.
My parents were involved. They were aware to a degree. I don't think they understood the depths of abuse that were going on, but they trusted her and they trusted the church, and the church was very much involved. Mm-hmm. My Bishop Bangader, knew what was happening and trusted Jody, and everyone just trusted her that, Jesus was, without any hyperbole, literally working through her.
That's so telling. Now, I didn't expect this podcast to be about the Mormon Church, but I'm glad that's kind of shifted into this because you guys, as you know, I took theology. I was a pastor at a Christian church. I've studied some religions. Mormonism is just, to me, is just the craziest cult-like thing. Is next to Scientology. It's just as bad, if not worse. Okay, and they believe this, and it's so crazy that they like believe in Jesus, but then Joseph Smith holds this high value up there, and then they have a different book that you're not supposed to have because the Bible tells you you're not supposed to have it, and all this kind of stuff. I posted a question on my page a little while ago. It says, if you ask a true Mormon, they can only take one book with them, right? You're only allowed to take one. The house is on fire, and there's one thing you can get, okay? And it's between the Bible and the Book of Mormon. What are you grabbing? Most Mormons will say Book of Mormon. Okay, but then they'll tell you when they come door to door how they're like, oh yeah, no, we believe in the King James Version of the Bible, blah, blah, blah. No. I'm telling you guys, it's such a crazy cult-like thing, and I cannot believe that people fall for this. And some people would say that about me, about being a Christian. I cannot believe you, Sky Daddy, Spaghetti Monster in the Sky, whatever you want to call it. Okay, they can't believe that type of thing. And it's really, and as a person who left ministry, who doesn't really like religion, who definitely still has faith, it's very different. The reason I choose to trust what I believe is because it's basically the only, God and Jesus are the only people who wrote love your enemies, right? They're the people that they say they don't turn your back on people who sin. Don't excommunicate people that do that stuff. Don't do all those things. It's one of those main ones where it's just like the enemy is still someone who needs to be loved. Where in the Mormon Church, this type of stuff, like if you do a lifestyle that Jesse led, right? And they just excommunicated, and that's just par for the course. That's normal. Right? There's no forgiveness. There's no understanding or grace. So I'll say it once here because it's very confusing for a lot of people. But there's a difference when Jesus is about infinite grace, where he covers all. When he died on the cross for your sins and rose again, everything was cared for. Everything was taken care of. Okay, so and it's not our job to judge people, and even though I do it on here all the time, it's really not. Okay, but everywhere else, other religions outside of this mainstream Jesus God, thing, there's always stipulations. There's always different things that go on. There's a lot of corruption, and there's corruption in churches in general. But I feel like I needed that baseline for you to understand that. So regardless what you believe, you think I'm crazy. I think other people are crazy who try to attach to this, but then add different rules and change it all up. When it's the most perfect thing that could ever happen, you don't need to touch it anymore. But this guy, Joseph Smith, stuck his head in a hat with some rocks in it and changed everything, and has like 6 million or 60 million or something like that Mormons across the world, or even more, I don't know, 100 million. and they hide money. Like, it's just so much corruption. If we went back to the fundamentals of what it all meant, Mormons wouldn't exist. Okay. Anyway, I'm saying that because this is what I believe. So I don't know if that matters to you guys, but it's really, really interesting.
But my family is incredibly libertarian and very much subscribes to the idea of privacy being number one, and has not wanted me to speak out as for embarrassment, for people misunderstanding, feeling misrepresented, but mostly just because they believe that everything had to be kept in the family. Everything is,
Mormons.
It's no one's business.
Mormons.
And the issue...
They want you to keep all the secrets in the family, even after you've been excommunicated and tossed to the side into the outer darkness, right? But, when you finally do speak out, you're even more ostracized, right? It's the secrets. That's the craziest part about church in general, and not just Mormon churches. I've said this before about mega churches and other churches. If your church has an NDA anywhere within its files, don't go to that church anymore. Churches aren't allowed to keep secrets. Okay, it's about transparency. Jesus never kept secrets. He doesn't want the church to keep. There should be no secrets inside of a church about how things are done and how things are prepared, or things that are hidden. And they're always done that way. In every church, including Mormon church, everywhere. It's all hidden. There's so many secrets. And that's a big separation between fundamental Christians and fundamental Mormons and everything else, right? They're the secrets that people will keep in order to protect what they believe is holy, right? But you shouldn't have to protect a true holy thing. Does that make sense? So this is going to be this whole podcast. I'm sorry. That's what this is all going to be about, just so you're aware. So that's the thing. The secret thing really gets me. I mean, a Christian church, they will keep secrets, but it's not really like a part of their religion. They'll do it because out of a necessity or the feeling that they should. But Mormons are like, no, this is part of the Bible. Like, this is part of the Book of Mormon. We got to do this.
That I take with that, and one of the reasons I was telling you before, one of the reasons I wanted to speak out is for anyone that has experienced anything similar, any sort of abuse, not just psychological and physical abuse, but I mean, to this degree, like any form of abuse, abusers will want you to keep silent, and they will manipulate you into believing that you have to, either out of blackmail, out of fear, or out of internalized guilt and shame. And with like my family, they believe that if I were to speak out, it would be a violation of their privacy. However, when someone abuses you, those people lose the right to their privacy.
Boom. Amazing. Jesse is very, very smart, very well spoken, brilliant, has been thinking about this for years, you can tell. Just kudos. They are very awesome. Like, thank you for doing this, Jesse, if you're listening. So I'm looking at my notes and everything else. I'm going to skip through because, again, I can't do 3 hours of this. That was a really important part of this. I wanted you guys to hear that. So I'm going to skip now to 12 minutes and 37 seconds.
Making sourdough bread kind of person, like very much a cottagecore goth, if you will. But yeah, I grew up in the church. My family's still very much involved Imagine
still being involved in the Mormon church after this. You imagine? You've seen this all. The bishops have sent people there. We know that she's reported back to bishops. Imagine, like, again, I think anybody that ever went to Jody's help likely are no longer Mormon. Right? And that's very telling.
I was a square, totally. But I was angry, and I would push back, and I would question things. And anyone that is from an Orthodox high demand religion knows that that's not okay. Mm-hmm. Asking questions, especially maybe higher esoteric unanswerable questions, or questions that point out skeletons,
hypocrisies, things like that. You're not allowed to question the Mormon church, everybody. And there are so many hypocrisies and things you can point out. Like, they trained their youth from a very young age to be able to fight literally spiritually, or like, I don't need to call it hermeneutics, or like get into like they literally trained their teenagers to theologically spar. Right? So if they go to a Christian, if they ever show up at a Christian's house and they ask and someone who knows anything about the Bible, and they actually ask those teenagers questions, you go on a blacklist. They're never coming back to your house. Okay, they are never coming back. They're trained to counter every single theological argument that makes their shit moot. Does that make any sense? So if I say, well, what is this? The Bible says here, do not add or take anything away from this, blah, blah, blah. It's a major sin. They'll have something to say about that, right? They'll give you anything. They're very, like, as far as an organized religion that fundamentally screws with children's brains, they are the number one. Okay, this is cult. This is a cult. There's no other way to put it. Now, Christians are very similar, but we're not taught from a young age to theologically spar. We don't know theology when we're young. We don't argue. These kids will. When they become teenagers and they do their missions at 18, they go to different communities and they knock on doors and they try to convert. They're one of the major religions that do that, next to Johos, which are basically the same thing. Okay, they are taught they're not taught about their faith and what makes it their own and everything else. They are taught how to argue. That's it. They're taught to fight, basically, to stand up for what they think is right. And there's not really a ton of grace, and that's really, really telling about the Mormon Church, because not really a lot of grace and forgiveness and understanding, and it really permeates throughout their families. And they're immersed in this, everybody. They totally have an answer for everything, even though it's totally bullcrap.
Why weren't black people allowed to have the priesthood? Why weren't they allowed to be at the church? What about sexism? What about race? Those types of questions. Mm-hmm. You don't answer. You don't talk about.
No, you don't.
And then also, I was so, I don't know if I mentioned this on air, but by the time I was 16, I had read the Book of Mormon like 6 times. I believed it. I was
there. Again, when you go into my comment sections about it, whenever I talk about Mormon churches, I want you to go look at the comments from the Mormons, okay? I'm like, no, we know we would take the KJV over the more book. No, what she just told you is correct. The Book of Mormon is what they memorize. The KJV they just use in tandem because that's their way of like sneaking into the rest of the world. They're like, no, we're just like them. We're just like the Christians, right? We're just like the thing that most the U.S. is built on, Canada's built on. We're just like that. When no, it's not. That's a back door. That's a Trojan horse. They will take the Book of Mormon supersedes the Bible, and that's the craziest part about all this.
I was reading, books like Jesus the Christ. I don't know if I was really understanding them. I thought I would. I mean, I was reading that at 13. And
That's pretty precocious.
I was a really, really strange little kid. I wanted to be an adult so bad as a little kid. And I think that a lot of that was rooted in, because my family connects on politics, religion, and sports, I was like, okay, well, I'll focus on religion, and this will get me an in with my dad, or this will get me a connection with my mom, or so I very much, I think I learned, it was nurture and nature. I think I had a natural, I was naturally inclined to go that way, but I also was just that was how you got attention from my dad. Was you either talked about politics, and I would listen to Rush Limbaugh with him. I would listen to talk radio as a 7-year-old. It was a very it was a very serious household in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. But it sounds like even though you had doubts and questions, you were very, very devout, extremely devout, almost to the point of what we call scrupulosity, which is just hyper intense, almost OCD like religiosity. Yeah. Because very, very, I was a super devout seminary president, Mormon, and I had only read the Book of Mormon once by the time I graduated from high school, and I certainly wasn't reading James E. Talmash's Jesus the Christ. So,
and see how the benchmark for Mormons is? I read the Book of Mormon. It's not that I read the Bible. So when you read the comments, that's all you need to know.
You had it at 11.
Yeah, it was.
You had it down up to 11.
So when in my head, it was, this is true. My logic wasn't, my logic was backwards. I started with the belief, or I was like, this is true, so I will find evidence to support it.
That's what she just mentioned to you, was Mormons in a nutshell. When they're being attacked or refuted or want to get into debate, that's their whole religion is based on that. The truth is this, and we're telling you the truth is this, But here's how you argue that truth without having them explore what it really means, because it doesn't make any sense.
Instead of like following the evidence to the eventual truth.
Jesse's brilliant, man. They should definitely have their own podcast.
Yeah.
But I also, I was like a total nerd, and I love, and again, like ADHD, this was like a hyperfixation, I think. And then the layer of familial acceptance. But Jody started, from what I understand, Jody started this whole process of like destroying people's lives, I think very young. I know that she like was trying to ruin someone's like a teacher's life, and
wow.
Again, this is really hard. I don't know.
It's crazy because we're getting into the Jody thing, and we talked about the church, but just synonymous in my opinion because the church used her. But you got to put this in perspective. So she's saying that Jody ruined people's lives. It felt like that this was inevitable almost. That this was Jody's MO to ruin people's lives. Even Kevin comes out, even Kevin kissed everybody's ass, by the way. But even Kevin said, look, ruin our marriage. Apparently Jody's ruined so many people's marriages. This is her MO. And so this was inevitable. I mean, it might even have gotten worse if she hadn't been caught. You know what I mean? So the abuse was getting crazy and rampant, and she justified it spiritually. So who's to say where she would have stopped if she honestly believed she was doing what Joseph Smith and Jesus told her to do? That's really telling.
What if there was truth to this? But I think she was like trying to get a teacher fired when she was in high school.
Wow.
And she got her therapist's license taken away.
Wow.
And I don't know if if it started out as truth, as like she was doing something that needed to be done, and then that spiraled into what she's doing now. Or if this has been like this type of behavior from the beginning, I don't know.
This is something that she's been, I think Jesse's right on it. Something that's permeated through her developmental years, Jody's years, to become this, and has always been this way. And likely because of guilt or something else, wanted to tear other people apart from that thing because she was feeling so guilty about what her ghosts were.
From what you know, did Jody have a normal teen? Were Jody and your dad raised in Southern California? Was it in Utah? And was there anything disturbing or troubling or abnormal about Jody's teen or young adult years that you're aware of? There's speculations about her that I don't necessarily want to feed.
She's gay. That's the speculation.
But do you think she had a normal developmental Mormon childhood and young adult years, or do you know anything about that you are able to share?
I don't really know a lot. I know that something that my grandfather told me, because I lived with him. I lived with my grandparents alongside living with Jody in the beginning, like when I first moved, like when I was first left in Utah.
So we had to go back. I forgot to say this. They were left with Jody because of the questions and things that they were asking. The parents just thought that it was going to get out of hand, and so they sent Jesse to live with Jody. That's where this all went down.
And my grandfather was also my 8th grade English teacher, and so I've always had a really close relationship with him. He told me that if he could redo the way he raised his daughters, he would, and that he felt like I was like a redemption for that. This is before the abuse got really bad, so I think he would probably not agree with that anymore. He passed away a number of years ago, but I don't think so. She was a basketball player. She was like a really good basketball player. I don't think she had a lot of friends. I think that I don't know if she had a lot of friends, but nothing. I don't think anything abnormal. She was raised in Tucson, Arizona. I think that's like the only place that she lived. At that point, my grandfather, I believe, was working in prisons. He taught deep and connective, and yeah. So she did that. That is something that she said to me, I think, when I was living with her. That was very strange because
with the women in the couples that she's counseled, there's a lot of wondering whether a lot of her unethical therapeutic practices stem from some sort of repressed same-sex sexuality, which we are LGBTQ affirming on Mormon Stories podcast. But I think it's fair when you see so much hatred towards the LGBTQ community, sometimes that is actually just repressed, same-sex sexuality. Is there any information you have about that, or is that just purely something you can't speak to, really?
I can't really speak to it. It's something that, I thought it's all speculation.
Yeah. Okay.
I've thought that since I was a kid.
That what?
That potentially she was queer.
Okay.
And I am queer, so I'm for it. I think it's great. It's real great. Waters are warm. And I have no idea. She did say something to me when I was living with her that was very strange, because I've known I was queer since I was like 7, and it was like experimenting with girls and friends since I was 7 or 8, and she knew about that, and it was very bad. It was very evil. But then she said something to me. She had this friend, her name's Bev. She said something to the effect of, yes, being gay is evil and, pleasures of the flesh and yada, yada. But if I were to have sexual relationships with my friends, if we were to, it would be different because there's a deep emotional connection there. And that's different.
So, what we all think. Why would you say something like that? We have obviously these other couples that have come forward and said, this one guy said, that basically she broke up our marriage and then had an inappropriate relationship with my wife. That's exactly what, it's not a big deal. Obviously it's to her, but the fact is that she tells people that it's evil, but then practices the evil. And that's the craziest part about this thing. It's all tied back to it all. They did a podcast about not abusing children, and she was doing the worst thing you could possibly do. So, obviously she's a hypocrite, clearly. So she just told you there.
And we were sitting in someone's living room and she said this, and I was just like, what? Yeah, that's called being gay. What do you think gay relationships are like? They are emotional and deep and connective, and yeah.
So there you go. Okay, I'm going to skip forward.
Where did things start to go? Where did your Mormon dream start to go sideways?
Oh man,
that led to Jody's involvement. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So when I was 15, my mental health I was really struggling. I was struggling with my relationship with my father. I was struggling with self-hatred. I knew I was gay. I knew that I was queer. That was a huge part of my internalized shame.
Really quickly, just around what year is this? Just because I like timelines, it helps me.
So 2009.
Okay.
2008, okay. 2009. I'm a sophomore in high school, and I am very sad and I'm very angry and I needed therapy. I would recommend someone. I would recommend a program if they needed that program. But Jody also was convinced that I was a drug addict. She was convinced I was a sex addict. She was convinced that I had abortions. She was convinced that she was convinced of so many insane beliefs. And she would, I know I mentioned this on text. She would rationalize and validate these types of behaviors through dreams and visions. She would have these dreams that God came to her and told her that I had an abortion.
If anybody comes to you, I don't care what religion they are, Christian, Mormon, whatever, and they say something like this, you can go ahead and disregard it. Understand that? Okay? That doesn't happen. It never does. It never will. Okay? And that's just, this is clearly somebody who is a psychopath. And this is manifesting in that way. Jody clearly has mental issues, probably stemming from her upbringing and the guilt of being more. So there's nothing good that ever comes out of this type of religion that perpetuates this type of belief that you can't do this, can't be that, can't do this. It's all about rules about what you can't do, right? There's nothing good that comes from it when people are all these things. And the Mormons, well, you have to be this and you have to be this and all that. They were racist up until like the 80s. Okay, then again, there was so much bad with this. And then they perpetuate onto their kids and onto their nieces and things like that. And that is the scariest part about all this. People want to talk about indoctrination in so many levels, right? But like when it comes to indoctrination, the religious indoctrination into things like this is so dangerous. I hate to hesitate to say this, but there's no other way to put it. All indoctrination into fundamentalist anything, beliefs, ideologies, all of them are dangerous for children, right? Because it assumes a kid is something that they might not be, right? And it's always to appease or help the person that is doing the indoctrinating. Does that make any sense? Now, that's religion, that's secular, that's everything. That's things that are going on in the schools now. That's everything. And it's shaping and moving a kid in one way that you need them to go because of what you think that should happen. Does that make any sense? And so it's really hard to navigate that as a parent. But I think as parents, we do a decent job coming forward now that we know all that stuff, right? Now, I would never force my kid to believe in Jesus, but I will take my kids to church, right? But if they have questions about it, then that's great. That's not going to be a negative thing. That's going to be a great thing. Right? There's a lot of great parents in churches and stuff in all over the world that want what's best for their kid, and the kid has questions, that's a good thing. But there are some parents who will not think that's a good thing, and they will punish, like she's saying right here, what Jody did, which was when the duct tape started.
And so no matter what I said, I was a liar. And then and also she was convinced that every word that came out of my mouth was a lie, and that, gave her rationale to put duct tape on my mouth. And that's why I was always duct taped.
Crazy.
Because every word I said was a lie.
Isn't that crazy?
Needed to be like physically reiterated to show that as a reminder that everything I say is a lie.
And I say this with hesitation, but and I understand they have this family thing and their family doesn't want them to come forward, but imagine people like Jesse here came out a long time ago. I feel like it's a really, really tough conversation that victims don't have to say anything, but should, right? Because then the future sort of matters. If something has happened to you and you don't tell anybody and you just keep it silent and let that person perpetuate that behavior forever, I feel like there's a conversation here about like, we gotta make it okay for victims to come out right when these things happen, not bury it and all these kinds of things, because this then allows Jody to perpetuate that same behavior, if not worse, later on down the road. I wish there was, it's crazy. I mean, this is obviously a long time ago this happened, so that's basically it, but we got to change that in society. If something negative has happened to you, make it okay to talk about it.
The way that this has affected my entire adult life is like, there's no way of quantifying it. It took me over a decade to like get to a point where I didn't actually think I was evil. That I didn't actually think that I was, and I know people say this like hyperbolically, but like the spawn of Satan, like I couldn't get close to anyone because I was so afraid that they would see.
And this is so telling about Mormon churches and fundamentalist religions, is that it's generally the opposite. It's the opposite. The evil that oozes from fundamentalist religions is so ironic. It's so crazy to me that people, especially in churches and Mormon churches and all over the world and fundamentalist religions and everything, pass so much judgment on everybody else in this world, right? And that's just not your job. Like if you actually took it back, and I've talked about this in many videos in the past about this type of stuff when it comes to religion and church and Jesus and everything else. It just isn't your job. It's not the church's job. It's not your bishop's job. It's not your pastor's job. It is nobody's job to judge you. It really isn't. And a lot of churches feel like that it's their job to correct and course correct and do these types of things. It's really not. It really isn't. If you were living the truth, really, really the truth, you wouldn't have to worry about it. You wouldn't have to course correct. But there's so much corruption and sin and evil inside the church. It's so glaringly obvious too, that those who rub up against it or see it for what it is and ask the questions are the ones ostracized from it and the ones who are sinned against because of it. When in reality, if these people were to come against the real Jesus with these types of questions and these questions or these concerns, it would be completely different than their experience that the church has given them now. I know I'm getting really deep with that, but that's so crazy and ironic that the evil is actually coming from inside the house. Does that make sense? So, and this gets really deep. This is crazy because they are really, really, they lived the whole thing, and they're telling you what you need to hear. And Mormons need to open up their ears. Christians, fundamentalists, any religion need to open up their ears and understand that the evil is coming from inside the house. And when you realize that and you wake up to it and your eyes are open to that stuff, everything starts making more sense. The faith then can, not all the time, but can become more real and the way it was supposed to always be. And that's people who dismantle from religion and dismantle their faith and get out and actually understand it and see it for what it is. They're the ones who are truly free. And that's very rare because churches don't like that.
They like, and this, when this type of abuse happens in families, I'm certain other victims of this type of abuse can attest to this. It's like, if my own family can't love me, how would anyone else love me? If my own family thinks I'm this evil creature, so evil that they can't even speak to me, so evil they can't even be in the same room as me. And from what I've heard, when these children of Ruby, when they were taken, or when Jody was arrested, Jody told them that these children should not be around anyone else, that they were evil and they can't be around anyone else.
And there it is. That's a really, really important part of this video. So when Jody and these people are saying these types of things, don't listen to them, because Jody thinks in her dreams, Jesus is telling her the sins of others. Okay. So she's convinced. This person is a psychopath, by the way. And I hope that she doesn't get off lightly because of that, but clearly there's something mentally wrong with Jody, then passed on to Ruby. But I don't care what they say. And this is really, really important, what they're saying. Don't listen. Don't believe it. Okay? And it's not our place anyway. So that's the craziest part about this. And people were taking what Jody and Ruby were saying at face value. And I think you guys need to realize, based on Jesse's story, is that likely that's all a made up lie in her head. Because Jesse's telling you the history of everything, and it's all making sense now.
Other children, right? They can't be around other children.
They can't be around other children. They shouldn't be around other children because they're evil. Or something to that effect. And this is exactly what she did to me. So the thing that I am finding, I'm having a lot of emotional reaction to, and it's complicated because I'm grateful, in a weird way, I'm grateful that she partnered with someone that has so much fame, because I don't think there was no way it would be getting the coverage that it's getting if she hadn't.
Absolutely.
But Jody is the mastermind here, not Ruby. Ruby is still responsible and should be arrested for harming her children for sure. And I'm sure Jody used what it was already there, which is what she does. She uses what's already there to her advantage. Jody is the one doing this. This is Jody's therapeutic ideas. These are Jody's ideas.
And Ruby got sucked into this partnership, and is obviously susceptible to this type of learned behavior because they're Mormon. If you can believe something like this guy stuck his head in a hat with some stones and came out with his own scripture, you'll believe anything. I've got a bridge to sell you in New York. Okay. You just take it back. I know a lot of people, again, will say that about me about being Christian. You believe in this guy that walked the earth and he healed people and rose people from dead. Jesus is a historical figure. He existed. Joseph Smith was too, though. Right. But Jesus, his stuff is well documented in history. He was a person that existed on earth and was followed and revered and loved and was famous as he was. And to this day, probably one of the still most famous people that ever existed. Talking about him 2023 years later, worshiping this person. Now, I choose to believe that. I choose to believe that he was who he said he was and that he rose from the dead. I choose to believe that because the alternative is I'm worm dirt, right? And then just it's blank when I die. But I choose to believe it because I believe in intelligent design. I believe that we're not here for no reason. I believe we sit here, I talk on this camera to you. I believe we're all interconnected to some degree. I believe that we're meant and called to do good, right? And I feel like we always fail, but we are meant to do that. We are meant to love our enemies. And the lessons that we're taught through this man were timeless. Like they're still to this day. Like imagine the things he said were just irrefutable. So regardless whether you believe in his holiness or not, the things he said were irrefutable even by today's standards, left, right, or center politically. It is crazy. And I do wrestle with that a lot, but I'm just saying, I don't know why this got so theological, but when it comes to this other crap and this other made up garbage, if you can believe that, you'll believe anything.
That she has been doing for over 14 years. This is not new. This is a pattern. And I cannot, I'm just so grateful that these children, were taken out of that care. But it's just so if you are a victim of abuse and you've had this, and then Jody telling all of them, like she told one of my aunts, I found this out years later, she told one of my aunts that the reason she kept me outside in the snow was because she was afraid I was going to murder her in her sleep. She told my family that I was so evil that I was capable of murdering her in her sleep.
That's a guilt reaction though, because I think that at times, Jody probably has a realization of what she's doing is wrong. There's no way you can read the Book of Mormon or the King James Version of the Bible and never be at all feel guilty about what you're doing. She knows what she's doing is wrong. It's so weird. And so likely thought to some degree, sometimes she's probably laying awake at night feeling guilty thinking, I have pushed this child so far, I am so scared. Like that's a guilt reaction to the absolute torture or the absolute thing, to all the things that Jody put Jesse through. That's a reaction to that. Like I've hurt you and abused you so much that I'm scared you're going to murder me. That's very telling about what Jody did.
I ended up, like I said, I ran away. I hitchhiked up to Salt Lake. I lived in the shelter. Not great things happened in the shelter. But again, like, if that's not like evidence enough of like, I would have rather have been in prison. I would have rather, or like arrested in a homeless shelter or in the hospital than be with Jody. And a lot of this was also subconscious, because consciously I still believed it, but I think my subconscious was trying to protect me.
I want to say this too about Jesse. Like I'm just obviously touching on this. I'm covering this video because I want you guys to go watch this in its entirety. It's probably one of the most important interviews to this case that we can watch, and Jesse's super brave for doing this, and I really, really appreciate them for doing what they're doing here. It's really, really incredible. But I don't know if you're watching this, Jesse, but you have to understand too that your parents are at fault. Not just Jody here, but your parents for turning a blind eye to this behavior, for not listening, for not loving, for not understanding, for following a religion and a dude named Joseph Smith rather than their own blood and flesh. And if I can say, and I don't, I might be so bold to you, is that Jesus would absolutely have condemned your parents for what they did and put you through. Jesus flipped tables. He was pissed off. There was a lot of times where Jesus was emotional about things that went down. I believe the Bible really touched on a lot is Jesus and children, and the fact that we're supposed to protect the most vulnerable of our population. And Jesus was like fiercely protective of everybody. Don't get me wrong, but he had time for everybody, but he also got pissed at the right people at the right times and said the right things. And those people they were irrefutable. But I need you to hear this, Jesse, if you're listening. I don't know, coming from somebody who's used to be a pastor who does believe in Jesus, and maybe this won't ring true, but if there is any solace in knowing anything about coming on the other side of this, is that Jesus absolutely condemns, and so does everybody. We're not supposed to judge here, but they will absolutely be judged to a huge degree if they get to the heaven that they think that they're going to get to. right? Or when they get to the place after we die, wherever it happens, we are judged. The most important part about religion and Jesus and the separation of the two is that Jesus, when you know Jesus, and I said this in my podcast about Mormons too, if a Mormon truly does believe in Jesus and who he really is, then you're good to go even though you believe all that bullshit. Okay? That's the craziest part about this, because the grace is abounding, it is unlimited, and it is without strings. Right? So if you actually truly do believe in Jesus and who he says he was, okay, you're good. Even if you do wear the damn magic underwear, even if you do believe in the Book of Mormon, okay? Having these other beliefs aside, that doesn't irrefute your and again, you only know until you get there if your heart really truly does. And some people would know that. And some people, it does ring true. Catholics, Christians, Mormons, Johos alike. If you believe that Jesus is who he says, you're good. And so that's really hard. And so I say all that to say this, is that I think that people that follow these things don't actually know Jesus and don't actually follow Jesus. Because if they did, there's just no way any of this stuff would manifest to the degree it does. And they're going to be so severely, harshly judged if they do too, right? Remember, I said this before, teachers and people who profess Jesus from a pulpit or from a position of power, those people are going to be so harshly judged when they get there for what they did wrong, because they were amplifying this. Like Joel Osteen, you got all these megachurch pastors out there who are going to not like what happens to them when they get judged. And they think that they're going to get up there and have all the mansions, right? And so I say all that to say that you likely probably don't believe this anymore, but your parents were wrong and should be judged accordingly and will be judged accordingly for what they put you through too.
I didn't know about this until years later, but apparently after I made that comment, and I was also in the process of finding a lawyer to take her to court. I was getting ready to sue her for child abuse, and to go down the route of criminally charging her. What happened was she, I guess, dropped off her son at my grandparents', like in a tizzy, and left the country, and for for how long I don't know, and I don't think she even knew, but she just left the country after that comment. And the way that my family saw it is I was again ruining the family. And I got a letter, and my dad is not practicing anymore, but my dad is a lawyer. Was a lawyer for a really long time. And so I have an email from him. I looked it up a couple days ago. I haven't read it since I got it in 2012. And it is horrifying. But my dad wrote me this email telling me, like, what would your family think? What would everyone that knows you in Corona, what would they think? Like, you publicly shaming this person is just, deeply embarrassing and emotionally immature. And regardless of how you feel about Jody, like, this is no one's business, and now you're making it public knowledge.
Yeah. So again, I'm going to stop it there just because I want you guys to go watch this, but that really pisses me off. And Jesse, you don't deserve any of that. You didn't deserve that, the life that you were brought up in. You didn't deserve it. Your parents are assholes. Okay. And they're going to be judged very harsh. So if they think they're going to get their planet and they're going to live up there and, planet 5 or whatever, they're going to be floating in the outer darkness TK smoothie like too, just so you're aware. So just take solace in knowing that regardless of what has happened, you're not the one to blame here. You are who you are because of who you are, not and in spite of what they did to you. And that's something to be proud of, right? And if Jesse's parents are watching, you guys can get wrecked, you bunch of assholes. This exists, and the reason why this is important too, guys, don't get it twisted. There's a bunch of reasons why this is super important, why this story is really, really important. One, family vloggers are damn liars. Okay? They all lie. They show you something that's fake. It's unattainable, it's unachievable, and it's detrimental in so many ways, notwithstanding to the children, to the people who are watching it, and to everybody around it. Okay, it's all fake. Fakery is not good. Being a liar and showing something that doesn't exist is not good for anybody, okay? Unless it's like fiction. That's different. This isn't fiction. They pretend it's real. And so that's bad. Number 2, family vlogging is dangerous. Especially the ones who are Mormon and religious in general, and the ones who talk about Christ and Jesus and everything else. I've yet to come across a Christian or a Mormon or any of these vloggers, any of them, that aren't the absolute biggest effing hypocrites that exist on planet Earth. Like you get the Hildebrandts out there talking about Jesus and doing documentaries on A's and things like that. And just like, absolutely, as soon as you come across like you are a person of faith or a believer in Jesus, but in the same breath and in the same thing, your living is made by exploiting children, you erase any authority you might have in that place. Okay, they honestly believe they're sitting there spreading the love of Jesus while they're exploiting a child that can't say anything about it. It's so dangerous to watch this stuff. And that's why this is really important. And so when Jesse comes forward with this type of stuff, we got to listen. Right? When these kids come forward on these Ask Me Anythings on Reddit, we got to listen. We're not listening. Not fast enough anyway. Rules and laws are being changed and I love it. Okay? But we're not listening fast enough. Because if we were listening fast enough, we would have mitigated so much of this disaster already. Ava Marjorie might not have had someone come blow the front door off her house with a shotgun. Okay? Ruby Frankie's kids might not have been abused and tortured to this level. Okay? They could have avoided it. We have got to start figuring out a way to make this not happen anymore. You've got YouTube out here shutting down channels like Russell Brand, and that's a whole different concept. But the reason I say that is because they can do this, right? The guy's not been convicted of anything. He lived like that debaucherous lifestyle and probably deserves what he's getting. To be honest with you, you're going to live that way. You're going to have to reap what you've sown, okay? Regardless of what he perceives it as. And I'm not really talking about the whole topic. I'm just saying YouTube can do things, right? It's very easy for YouTube to be like, okay, you know what? There is no more monetization of any child under 13. It's just not going to happen on our platform anymore. We do not agree with this. And you know what? They don't. They'll say they don't. It's protection of kids. They do. They could flick a switch and it'll be gone in an instant. These people, if you aren't allowed to monetize children anymore, it would disappear overnight. You wouldn't see it anymore. What would be the reason they would do it? They won't anymore. They do it because they get paid to do it. And so we've got to, this type of thing, hopefully, is the catalyst for major change. I'm doubtful, but I hope this conversation continues and goes right up into the politicians' hands. And the politicians force social media platforms to change what they do. Because social media platforms can't make too much money to do it. There are billions of dollars at stake here. And again, they could easily make this go away overnight. Overnight. And it speaks volumes that they won't even glance at it. They won't even look at it. And then this happens. And then that happens. And then other things happen. And kids go no contact with their parents. They sue their parents. They don't want to have anything to do with them. They live in abuse. They're coerced into these lifestyles. They are tracked, stalked, belittled, bullied on the internet, bullied at school. They are watched by predators. They have parasocial relationships with strangers on the internet. All against their will, everybody. And society allows this. And a lot of you watch it. Regardless if it's hate or not. You hate watch it or you want to see what's next. And that's the problem, everybody. It's worth so much money. And until social media platforms wake up, we're at a loss. It's not going to happen. And unfortunately, it's going to take something worse than what happened to Ruby's kids in order for anything to change. And now we play the waiting game. Because this is one more step. This is one more notch in the belt. YouTube is watching very closely. And they're even like, I understand that YouTube is starting to take down channels that are reposting their content like in full. Not like when I repost videos, I'm not reposting their content. I mean, people are taking the channels, they've downloaded all the 8-passenger videos and they're re-uploading them to the internet. And YouTube is YouTube doesn't like this story. This isn't good for YouTube, everybody. None of the family vlogging things that we ever see is good for YouTube, except for monetarily. And everybody is starting to wake up to it. Thank God. Thank God. And this story is just one of those things that's just not even close to being done yet. And we need to literally milk it for every drop, but direct it to the people who can make the change and say, look what happened. Look at the horrors. We're not even through. Every week, it seems there's more horrors that come out about this case. And every week I look back and I'm thinking to myself, this didn't have to happen. If we did not allow the monetization of children online, none of this would happen. Like, not publicly anyway. These kids wouldn't, they wouldn't be forced to be zoo animals or in a fishbowl or to work for free. It's crazy what's happening and that we allow it. It's just, sometimes I think about this, what I talk about on this channel all the time. And sometimes I'm just like, obviously, it's like bashing my head against a wall. Like, we're never going to win. But sometimes I think, I cannot believe the people in power allow this to happen and have no problem with it. It's so incredibly mind-blowing to me. But so that was a really crazy video. Everybody take a deep breath when you're going to need it today. Things have to change, and these conversations are really helpful to that. I think we keep talking about it. We will not stop talking about it until it goes away. But could you imagine one day that YouTube just decides, hey guys, no more monetization of minors on our platform? Oh my gosh, the celebration, the party. And I don't think that they would, they'd lose money, but I think they would make it up in other ways. And I think that money shouldn't be I think there's trillions of dollars going to this stuff. Like, it's just a minuscule drop in the hat, and they don't need to do it, and they will save kids' lives by doing it. So I don't know how we're going to do it, but we got to keep trying. Thank you for being here for these tough conversations. Thanks for being amazing, incredible, and valuable. Don't you forget it, guys, and I will see you when I see you.